How's it going? Welcome to the first episode in a multi-episode series where I'm going to walk you through how to become a master of convolutional neural networks using a video game. Basically, when it comes to computer vision problems, there's several different subdomains that you need to learn in order to be a master. Those include image classification, object detection, and then semantic segmentation. And then at the end also, I'm going to throw in maybe a little bit of reinforcement learning. And the game I'm going to be using is a game that we're going to code up in Pygame. It's just a simple shooter gallery game, something that we can use to generate different data sets for these different problems. We're going to go ahead and learn how to generate a data set for image classification, object detection, semantic segmentation. And then at the end, we're going to go ahead and tie all these things together to kind of keep it fun and make it seem like it's more of a real world problem. We're going to use object detection and then hopefully reinforcement learning as well in order to actually play the video game at the end. So going from learning how to implement all these different computer vision solutions to different computer vision problems, and then tying it back together in order to use that so that we can build AI to actually play our game. So let's go ahead and dive right into actually building up our video game. All right, first things first, let's go ahead and just do a high level overview of what exactly we're trying to accomplish. So essentially we're gonna have a screen. We're gonna go ahead and draw our background image onto the screen. And then what I wanna do is I wanna make groups of targets. So the first group is gonna be pretty big size targets. And then as you kind of go up on the screen, they get smaller and smaller. The bigger targets are gonna end up being worth more points than the smaller targets. And essentially what I wanna do is be able to, when you move your mouse, you'll have a crosshair and you can move it over the targets. And when you click on the target, it'll go ahead and increment our score. So the smaller groups of targets, when you click on those, give you a higher score, bigger ones give you lower score. And then essentially we'll be able to, once we're done, once we've clicked all the targets off the screen, then it'll end the game and say you win and give you a score. All right, to get started, we're gonna go ahead and import some libraries. So we'll go ahead and import Pygame. We're also gonna be using random and NumPy. Okay, so if you've followed any kind of Pygame tutorials before, which this kind of isn't necessarily a tutorial per se, more so walking through exactly how to set up this particular game, you'll know there's kind of some initial parameters that you can kind of follow and set up in order to set up your event loop and get your game ready to start running. So we're going to go ahead and define our screen width and our screen height, whatever you want those to be. And then what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to kind of copy and paste the generic framework of a Pygame and how it tracks event loops, right? So essentially what we're doing here is we're just initializing it. So calling pygame.init, and then we're setting a clock variable, and then we're also creating our screen. So our screen, we're then setting to our screen width and our screen height. And then, we're then starting our event loop. So set running equal to true. And then while it's running, I'm going to go ahead and check for user events. So we're just setting up the generic one that if you want to quit, then you're going to set running equals to false, which will then exit the loop and then call pygame.quit. And then if it does not quit, you're going to go ahead and update the display and then tick our clock. All right, so I like to set up things using config files, right? Or kind of Python dictionaries that kind of set all the different parameters for the thing I'm trying to accomplish. So we're going to go ahead and do that here as well. So I talked about I want different types of groups and I want to be able to set different parameters for each one of the groups. So we're going to go ahead and do that here. So we're going to have our large group, and within that large group, we're going to go ahead and set how many of them we want. Let's set that to 7. We're going to go ahead and set the Y location, right? So we're going to randomly generate the X locations, but we're going to just hard code where we want the Y location to be. We're going to go ahead and set what we want that target to be scaled to, 100 pixels at this particular one, and then we're going to set the points for that target. So all large targets are going to be worth 10 points. So we're going to go ahead and do this for all the different groups that we want to create, which we'll just go ahead and do 3 of them. So we're going to have large, medium, and then small. So go ahead and change these accordingly. All right, so medium, we're gonna go ahead and have 8 of those. Location, we're gonna set to 170. So some of this stuff is just kind of arbitrary. You can kind of pick whatever you want. We're gonna go ahead and scale those to 50, so we're making them a little smaller. And then we're actually gonna make those worth 25 points. And then for small, we're actually going to only have 5 of those. We're going to go ahead and set the location. So the Y location to 15. We're going to scale those to 25, and those are going to be worth 30 points. Okay, so that's kind of the generic workflow. So now we need to kind of define some functions that are going to take that configuration or those parameters and then output those targets to the screen. So probably the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make our target class. So since this is all based on target objects, we're going to go ahead and make a class called target. We're going to inherit from pygame.sprite.sprite. So this is the built-in sprite class for Pygame. That basically sprites are the characters or different objects you want to draw onto the screen. So then we're going to initialize this class. We're going to pass a few parameters of these, right? So we want to be able to set what image we're using. We want to set the X and Y location, and we want to be able to say how many points that target's worth, right? So go ahead and super. Okay, so then we want to go ahead and just set those internal parameters for this class based on those past parameters. So all right. Okay, so this next one's going to be the rectangle. So we're going to set the internal class attribute rect to equal to the self.image.getRectangle. So essentially this is a built-in Pygame functionality which allows you to get the location of the image that's being blit to the screen, right? So, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set the X value for that rectangle equal to our X value. And then we're going to go ahead and set that Y value equal to our Y value. And basically that allows us then to just set where we want the target to go. And then we're going to find another method here called getScore. So this is just going to return the self.points. So it's going to just tell us how many points that target is worth. All right, so now we kind of have our target class. Now we kind of want to go ahead and generate them, right? So be able to create a list of targets. So one of the things that Pygame has is they have this called groups. So you can create groups of sprites. And since we'd kind of talked about we want large, medium, and small, we kind of want those to be groups. So we're going to go ahead and start with that. So we're going to go ahead and define the generate targets. So two parameters we're going to want to pass is where we want to generate the targets is on the screen, and we're going to use our group parameters. So we take a look at small, it's going to pass this Python dictionary, or yeah, this dictionary of these different parameters. So we want to take that as an input. Okay, so what we need then, right? So if we want to generate these targets, we want to randomly generate the X values, and then we also want to pull in the Y values. So we're going to go ahead and create the X values and Y values equals get offsets from the screen based on the group parameters and then given a particular buffer. So we're actually going to set the buffer up here, make that a global variable, to set that equal to 10. I haven't defined get offsets yet, but we will get to that. And then essentially you're going to want to just return pygame.sprite.group, and then it'll be a list of target load image. We're going to define that as well. Pass the target.png. That's going to be our target. And then we're going to go ahead and pass scale because we're going to scale that. And then our x index I. And then our points. And this is going to be for I in range group number. Got to close that. Okay, so basically to kind of walk you through what this is doing, right? So we're basically generating our X and Y values for our targets. And then we're just returning a group, which is actually a list of targets where we load in our target image, we scale it to the specific group scaling, and then we also pass the group points. And this is done for however many numbers you want in your group. So come back up here, we want 5 for small, we want the Y location to be 215, our scale to be 25, and then our points to be worth 30. Okay, so what we're going to do then is we're going to kind of go through the get offset functions. So these you don't necessarily need to dive too much into. I'm just actually going to basically just copy and paste these. Again, it's just kind of essentially what these functions are doing is just returning random X values, making sure that the targets aren't overlapping, and then taking in that Y value and then placing those, creating those X and Y values that way, making sure there's some sort of buffer between them, right? So essentially this sample and ranks, I actually pulled these off of the internet, off a simple Google search on how to, create these different samples. And then just for your offsets, you're just returning your X values and your Y values. Okay, so the next one is load image, right? So essentially what that's doing is pulling and using the built-in Pygame functionality as far as loading in your different images. So we're going to go ahead and copy and paste that one as well. So just kind of walk you through exactly what's happening here just to explain it. So we're going to go ahead and pygame.image.load our path, and we're going to convert it to alpha. This is just changing the channel in which it's being blit onto, and then we're going to go ahead and call pygame.transform.scale, and then we're going to pass our scale values. So this is basically taking our image. It could be a certain number of pixels wide and high, and then it's going to go ahead and scale those to our set number of pixels. Okay, so now we kind of have our generate targets. The next thing we're going to need to do is then generate our groups. So if you see, we have this whole config, so we have multiple groups. So this one's actually pretty simple, just a simple for loop. So we're going to go ahead and create a function called generate groups. So we want to generate it on the screen, past a config file. So all we're going to return here is a list of generate targets screen params, and then it's for group params in config.items. So all this is doing is it's basically iterating through each key value parent in the above config dictionary. It's pulling each group and then its parameters and then passing those to generate targets, and it's returning a list of those. So that's basically the rundown of how to generate our list of target groups. Okay, so now that we've kind of defined up and set some of these different functions we're going to need downstream and kind of define them and got them ready to go, let's go ahead and actually start, drawing our background image and drawing our targets and our crosshairs to the screen and get these things kind of working. So take a look. We got a target here. This is kind of what our target's going to look like. It's our crosshair PNG. And this is our background. So go ahead and make sure we're going to get these things set up and run properly. All right, so let's go ahead and create our background image and get the loaded in with Pygame. So we're going to go ahead and call pygame.image.load, and the path to our background is actually background.jpg, and then we're going to go ahead and call .convert on that. And then let's go ahead and set up the crosshair as well. So crosshair image equals pygame.transform.scale, pygame.image.load. We got our crosshair 3.png, and then we're actually going to scale that to 200 by 200 pixels. And then we're going to go ahead and grab the rectangle so we can get the location of this image, and then we can set it a lot like we did for the targets. So equals crosshair image.getRect. And then another thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set our mouse visibility to false, because we want to actually draw the crosshair over where our mouse is going to be. So we just call pygame.mouse.setVisible, and then we just pass false to that. Okay, so now we're also going to go ahead and initialize our score. So down here, go ahead and call score is equal to 0, and then create our initial targets. So just call our generate groups function, screen, and then pass our config at the top. Okay, so now we kind of have all that all set up. What we're going to do is we're going to actually come down here, come back into our event loop. And then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually screen .blit. And then we're going to pass our background image and then location 0, 0. So that's the upper left. And then we're going to go ahead and actually draw our targets to the screen as well. So for group in targets, group.draw screen. All right, the next thing we need to do is go ahead and draw our crosshair at our mouse location. So what we're going to do is set the rectangle center to the mouse location. All right, so now that we've done that, then we can go ahead and blit to the screen that crosshair picture at the crosshair location. All right, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and also blit to the screen the score. So we're going to go ahead and get a Pygame font. And then with that font, we're going to render score plus the string of our score. Next thing is true. And then we want it to be the color white, so we're going to set it to 255. It's RGB value. And then where we want to blit that is not the complete upper left. We're going to give it a little buffer offset. All right, there we go. So let's go ahead and fire this up and make sure that this is working properly. All right, and there we have it. So the only thing is when you click, we don't actually seem to be doing anything, incrementing the score or removing the targets. So let's go ahead and build that functionality in. All right, so it's actually quite easy. So we're going to go back up to our event loop. And then instead of quitting, we're going to go elif. So event.type equals pygame.mouse button down. Spell that correctly. And then we're also going to say if event.button is equal to 1, and that means if it's a left click, then what we're going to do is we're going to actually iterate through the targets, the groups in targets for group in targets. And we're going to do is we're actually going to increment the score. So we're going to check the hit. If our click hits a target in the groups, right, it's going to increment the score and then remove that target from the list. So we haven't defined check hit yet. So what we'll do is we'll kind of go back up here, define check hit. So what's getting passed to this is going to be the target group, the position. So this actually happens to be the mouse position and then the actual current score. So what we're going to do is we're going to go for target in target group. If that target rectangle collides with our mouse position, so we're going to call it collide point, and then get the X value of the position, and then get the Y value. So if that happens, what we're going to do is we're going to increment our score by target.getScore, which we defined earlier as a class method, and then target.targetGroup remove that target. So pretty simple. If our click doesn't actually hit one of the targets, then it's just going to return the original score. So that's going to work quite well for that. And then Yeah, so basically that should be then as the event loop goes through, it's going to, if we click, it's going to check and make sure that if we did hit one of the targets, it's going to remove it from our target list. And if it doesn't, then keep going. And then there's only one more thing I would like to do here, which is check to make sure and see how many targets we have left. Because if you shoot all the targets, you want the game to end, right? So what we're going to do is if get count, which we haven't defined yet, but we will, of the targets equals 0. What we're going to do is we're going to actually copy and paste this code here. So we're actually going to blip to the screen. Instead of score, what we're actually going to say is you win. And then we're probably not going to put it to the same spot. We'll just kind of increment that over 150 to 150. And then we'll go up and define our get count. So this one's actually a pretty simple function as well. Basically just need to iterate through the target groups and get the counts. So targets is a list of groups. So count we're going to initialize equals to 0. And then for group in targets, we're just going to increment the count by the length of group dot sprites. So those basically these target groups up here. So each target, we created this, we created the group. So generate the groups. What that does is you can actually grab the group sprites and it'll tell you how many sprites are actually in that group. Okay, so pretty simple. And then all we have to do is return the count. All right, and there we have it. So this should be kind of the setup of everything. Just kind of one more once over. So kind of creating our buffer, our screen width, screen height. We have our config file here where we have our large, medium, and small groups. Defined our target class. We have a function here that generates targets. So we actually have a group of targets. And then kind of our helper functions to figure out where exactly we want to put those targets on the screen, do it in somewhat of a random manner. And then some functionality here that checks to see if we actually clicked any of our targets and then counts how many targets we have left. And then basically just some basic Pygame functionality and how to get this all set up in your event loop so that when you're running the game, you can go ahead and have these things interacting properly. So let's actually go ahead and give this a shot here. And, oh, something's not working quite right. Let me go ahead and take a look. All right, I actually found the problem here, so I actually forgot to return the score. So pretty simple fix. So go back up to your check hit function and actually return the score. And then let's go ahead and try that again. And there we have it. Shoot our targets and you get score blip to the screen. So go ahead and run through shooting all these targets quickly. Bang, you win. All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed. In the next episode, we're going to get into actually how to use Pygame in order to generate our training data sets so we can start learning about exactly what goes into making data for object detection, semantic segmentation, and image classification. And then once we get the data sets kind of generated and we walk through exactly what that entails, then we'll start diving into actually training the models. So hope to see you in the next one.